Now, a US robotic lander has touched down on the surface of the moon, but mission control hasn't been able to confirm whether the landing was fully successful. Named Athena after the Greek goddess, it's equipped with a drill, a robotic hopper and a rover. Its landing site's on a plateau about 160 kilometres from the moon's south pole. Its mission includes taking 3D images of the terrain. It's also carrying technology to detect resources in lunar soil that NASA says could be extracted and used by future explorers to produce fuel or breathable oxygen. Well, Keith Cowing is editor of NASAWatch.com and joins us from Washington, D.C. Welcome back, Keith. Has this landing been a success as far as you can tell?
As far as I can tell, I've been listening to the talking and, the mission control and so forth, and it's on the moon. They're talking to it. They're turning off the things that they don't need after landing. They're starting to aim the solar arrays to get power, and they're starting what's called surface ops. In other words, it's doing its thing. The only thing they're not exactly certain of is how it landed on the moon itself, how the antennas are pointing back to Earth, and until they get a picture of the ground and where the legs are, they're probably going to still be wondering exactly what's going on. But I think we're well above 90% success at this point.
Okay, and what's the problem? Why are communications so sketchy?
Well, here's the thing. If, you're coming into the moon, here's your moon, and you land like this, it's at the South Pole, so you've got a bit more of a communications issue back to Earth to begin with. And they think that when it came down, they had what's called multipath issues. As you come down, you get mountains and craters, and the radio waves can sort of bounce around a bit. Right. They expected this, but it's given a little confusion as to exactly how it came down and where it came down. And add in the fact that the antennas that actually do the talking back to Earth may not be perfectly aligned. So they're trying to figure all that out. But again, they're talking to the spacecraft. It's alive. It didn't crash and blow apart. It's just, did it land perfectly to do everything it needs to do? We'll have to wait a few hours to see.
And tell us a bit about what it's going to do while it's up there.
This is a cool spacecraft. I mean, as spacecraft go, this is a cool one. Let's see. It lands on the moon, South Pole, which is kind of where everybody wants to send humans, looking for ice and water and things like that. Once we know that it's working okay, it'll shoot a little thing out called a hopper, and that'll go a couple hundred meters and land inside a dark crater, which nobody's ever done before, and it'll examine what it's like in there. Meanwhile, there's this little rover that'll drop down and drive around, which, again, is something that's not that easy to do. In the meantime, there's a lot of science. And again, this mission's all about science. That's why we're going there in the first place. You may say, oh, a company's doing it or what. We're going there to do science, to understand what it's like to be at the South Pole of the moon, and then prepare for what we'll do when humans go. But there's another cool thing. The other day, the Firefly lander, which came down a couple days ago, showed that you can use GPS, the stuff that you use every day to find places on a map that you don't need the map for anymore. Now, this rover, the second one that just landed, has Nokia hardware on there to use cell phone technology, 6G. So it's identical to what you use here on Earth. So here we are. We now apparently will have GPS and cell phone coverage on the moon. Now all we need to do is to send people there to use it.
Oh, wow. And so you were saying that the South Pole, this is where they think there is ice. Do we think that is because have there been indications that ice and water have been there, or have we just already searched the North and not found anything?
Yeah, actually, the North Pole may too, but the South Pole, we've been studying the moon for a long time, and I'm holding this up on purpose, there are some places in the South Pole of the moon that are always dark, like have been dark for hundreds of millions of years. And so while it can get hot and cold everywhere else, in these cold areas, gases can condense and become ice crystals and so forth mixed in with the rock. And so we've been able to study the moon from orbit, and we've seen hydrogen and other evidence that there's something there. But it's one thing to look down at the moon. It's another to be there on the surface, picking up some of the regolith of the soil and saying, yeah, there's water here. So that's what we're going to do. But we already know there's something there. We just want to calibrate and do the science that's necessary to understand, is there a little bit of water or is there a lot of water? Because, again, when we go to the South Pole, the idea is to make rocket fuel out of it, and we kind of want to know if there's enough there.
So who's paying for this?
Well, this is the interesting thing. You hear commercial, and you think, oh, well, they're just doing it. Well, NASA decided that one way to get answers quicker is to take on a little more risk and put out this idea. It's called a commercial landing services contract to companies to go take their landers, and then NASA would put their stuff, their payloads on it. And they're a little riskier, but the idea was that you get more than one of these missions to go, and if they all land, well, great, we got a whole bunch of science. If one crashes or doesn't work right, we still got the other. So you're deciding where you're going to put your risk. You're going to spend all your time in eggs in one basket or eggs in multiple baskets.
Okay.
So
well,
NASA's paying for it. But
we'll leave it there, not with the price of eggs in the US. Keith, thank you. Keith Cowing, editor of NASAWatch.com.